Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call a meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. All individuals entering city-operated facilities, including City Hall, are required to wear a non-medical face mask. Those at the table are not required to wear the mask while sitting, as long as they are distanced 6 feet apart from each other. Once you leave your seat or from the table, you must put your mask on. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people avoid close contact within 2 meters with anybody showing symptoms of respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. My name is Ron Eric. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing the panel members is Laurie Davidson and Mr. Robert Luke. Representing the city of Winnipeg is Ryan Valderrama, and our recording secretary is John Rojo. We'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I would confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. Session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask the secretary to swear in the assessor, and to swear in Mr. Mercury, and to affirm Mr. Newfield.
Please state your full name. Brian Valderrama. You affirm the evidence you present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Do I understand? Do I put on my mask?
No.
Okay.
Please state your full name. You affirm the evidence you present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your full name. James Mercury. You affirm the evidence you present the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Mr. Newfield, there are 2 points that you are appealing: classification and liability. What about quantum?
No, it's
No,
it seems fine.
Okay. So we will deal with liability first. Is that okay with you guys?
Certainly. Yeah, I think
Okay.
we can deal with them both at once.
Okay.
It's fine.
I think you will be discussing these matters, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I believe we've circulated just one other handout.
Thank you.
I believe it's been scanned, and this is just the classification regulation under the Municipal Assessment Act. Just because class is an issue, and apologize that it wasn't in the Collier's brief previously provided, but I'll be referring to this. So 2 points really at issue here. Again, value is not disputed. It is simply the classification, as you'll note from the assessor's brief. The property is currently classed as other, taxable other, and as you will hear, as you will see from the brief, this is in effect, the bulk of the property is a medical boarding facility. So in our view, it clearly should be classed as residential property under the class regulation, specifically Res 2, and we'll go through that. But just some general background I'll provide to you, and then the legislation, Mr. Neufeld can fill in some of the details in terms of the use of the property as well. Both of us have been there. You have a floor plan if you look at the Collier's brief. There's just some exterior photos on page 2. And if you look at page 3, you'll see the lower level floor plan. It's this portion of the building that is used for educational purposes. This property is effectively run and owned and managed by Norway House Cree Nation. And they use this facility for 2 purposes. First and foremost, we'll talk about, as I indicated, a medical boarding facility. So for those individuals in the community who need to attend Winnipeg for medical treatment, this is where many of them are housed, some on a shorter duration, some are there for several weeks, if not months, depending on the type of treatment they're receiving in the city. But the basement location is used for a training program. And perhaps Mr. Neufeld can speak to that in a little bit more detail in terms of just the background. So that portion of the space would fall under section 23(1)(d) of the Municipal Assessment Act, which is found at page 13 of the brief, which indicates the property that is used by a seminary of learning is exempt from school tax. So it's only that portion of the space that is used by the institution for training purposes. And Mr. Neufeld can speak to, again, the background of that training program and the square footage applicable to it, where we say that provision applies. With respect to the upper levels, again, so if you look at the brief, you can see the floor plans there. Effectively, the way this is laid out is it's really a apartment style construction. There are several rooms, or each of them have, it's effectively a small apartment. There are cooking facilities there. There is bathrooms in each of the facilities, sleeping accommodations. There is also what I'll call a public kitchen area. They do encourage food to be delivered to many of the residents there, just for safety reasons. So just some background on the program that is run by the First Nation here at this facility. You'll see at page 7, just at the bottom of page 7, just some background. First Nation provides travel arrangements for the residents. They are placed here at 333 Maryland. If there's space issues, then they will default to a hotel accommodation, but this is their, because many of the stays are long-term in nature, they will stay there. And there is a bit of a write-up, page 9 and forward, in terms of the program. I won't take you through all of it because not all of it is applicable to what we're talking about here. But if you look at page 9 and just the under treatment access program, and you'll see that the Norway House Cree Nation TAP program provides medical transportation services to all Norway House Cree Nation band members that are referred for medical services. They require transportation to and from medical appointments in Norway House, Thompson, and Winnipeg. And in addition to those transportation services, they provide for accommodation. And so you'll see at the top of the second column at page 9, They meet the accommodation needs of the community members in Winnipeg. If you just flip the page to page 10, the program is actually, I won't attempt to pronounce it. It's known as KSIW. Again, this is the program where they house the various residents. They indicate that, and this is taken from the 2016-27 annual report, that this program is operated by Norway House Cremation. It's a medical boarding home facility, provides overnight short-term and long-term accommodations for patients and their medical escorts referred to Winnipeg for health and wellness services. They can accommodate up to 74 patients in the building, and there are some services that are provided if required. And then the next page, page 11, just a little bit more background on the medical boarding home improvement. This is from the earlier report, 2011 to 2013. You'll see a 4-story structure purchased in 2003 for use as a medical boarding home and office space. So much of that office space is in the basement where, again, the training programs are provided. So that is the background. Mr. Neufeld can fill in some of the factual details I may have missed, but I'll just take you now to the classification regulation. If you have that, I think you may have all copies of it, or at least electronically. So you'll note at page 6 of the of that class regulation under residential 2. Yes.
Because we don't know whether you're here or
Yeah. Yeah, it's the handout you have. If you look at page, yes, that's a little bit easier. Yeah. Page 6 at the top. So the class of property known as residential 2 consists of a building or portion of a building containing more than 4 dwelling units that is used or when occupied is designed to be used solely as dwelling units for residential occupation and land contiguous to the dwelling unit, etc. It also includes 4 sub-C dormitories. So this is a bit of a hybrid type of facility. This is not a hotel. It is not a motel. It is many, as I indicated, most of these, it is designed as really a traditional apartment block, and many of the residents there are there for a considerable period of time, again, depending on the treatment that they're receiving. So dormitories, one traditionally thinks of dormitories as on a college or university housing accommodations, but the term dormitories is kind of a broad definition in the class regulation and under section 1, which is at page 2. That includes part of a building that contains facilities for the preparation and consumption of food by and for the living requirements of persons who sleep in the dormitory. So it's not just the rooms per se, but the food preparation and eating areas, of which there are some in this facility. So that is just the legislative background and just a brief overview of the property. And I don't know if Mr. Neufeld wants to speak to the square footages and perhaps a little bit more on the training program, to your knowledge.
Thank you. So the training that goes on is a few different things. There were classrooms set up for teaching, I forgot the name of the language, the band's language. So they were teaching it in the basement rooms. The other part of the basement rooms was used for training workers who were going to be sent to Norway House on individual jobs. So they would receive some education in Winnipeg prior to being shipped to Norway House. Some workers went there on long-term contracts. Some went on, work, the sort of program where you work 30 days, you get 15 off or that sort of thing. And then they would come back to Winnipeg. So the training facility was teaching them their jobs. And in Norway House, their building a school and a hospital facility. And so the training was done there. And while the people were being trained, I believe some of them were getting accommodation in the upper floors. So that's the basement, and that square footage is, the assessor has it in his report. He's got all the right numbers here. It's 14,270 square feet. Now, some of that is service area in the basement, so it's not all taxable, but not all, rentable, but based on the method of applying the exemption rates, I think I'll show you what my thinking is. And but there's a couple other points I was going to discuss on page 11 of our evidence. You can see that there's a description of what their intent was, and this does date back to 2013. Is that they were going to be using the second and third floors for their medical boarding, and the first floor was intended to be a regular apartment. And that's what it is. It's a regular apartment. Right now, I guess you could characterize the building as pretty much closed, except to members of their particular First Nation. But that doesn't change the usage that's in there. They are allowed to rent apartments, and going back and looking at the pictures on page 3 is you can see that the third floor have larger units, that there's bedrooms in there, and there's 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. You can see the floor plan. Now, when we were there, they were just finishing up some of the work, and they ended up putting in all new equipment to handle this. As you may recall, was the workers' compensation building. It was an office. So in order to accommodate people living in there, they had to bring in air handling facilities, for example, exhausts for kitchens and for bathrooms, and then units, heating and cooling units that are different. So there was a fair amount of expense. And when we showed up there, they were just finishing off several of these units. So the first floor, you can see all large 1 and 2 bedrooms. The next page, on page 4, shows the second and third, and the second is a full floor, the third is a part floor. And those were set up, or are set up, as more smaller style rooms. You can see that each room has the bathroom inside it, and a small cooking area. But the intent is that most people will go to the dining area, and there's a food preparation area there, as well as the fourth floor. It's the same setup. The third floor, same setup. Now, the fourth floor at time of inspection was an office used by a social assistance facility and who were leaving. And this space was, as of now, has been taken over by the First Nations group, and it's their administrative offices for the building that they're in. So the education facility and the residential facilities are managed by the offices on the fourth floor. So it in itself is not, would not be an exempt site, but as an accessory use to the others, it would be part of that. I think and I'll let Jamie speak to that, but when you have a hospital, not all the hospital would be exempt as hospital, but it's exempt because it's support services for the hospital. You still got to wash the clothes somewhere, and that's part of the hospital function, where you still need administrators. So that's what we were looking at. Picture on page 6 is a schematic of, I believe this is an electrical diagram. So this shows how when they were redoing the rooms. I believe that this is the one for the third floor, but I'm not 100% sure. Yes, it is. It's room third floor. So this was the construction 2014 plan. So at the time, just to show you the extent of the renovations. So the areas that we have on the building, and we're not going to disagree with the assessor's numbers, a gross area of 55,930 square feet. Of that, 49,370 are in what we would call production for either classroom or residences, and 6,560 square feet is the administration office on the 4th floor. The total areas in use, the education portion is 14,270 square feet, and the residential portion is actually I never added that up here. It's 6,560 plus 14,270. So 35,100 feet is residential. 35,1 and 14,270 education, and 6,560 is administration. Now, these numbers are not precise because there are so many shared things. For example, the 1st floor has a larger lobby area where it's a security lobby where people will come in, and that's actually a common area. So you could take that and split it up and put it different ways. And as I mentioned, the basement has mechanical rooms in the basement. So they don't have 14,000 square feet of classroom down there. It's probably closer to about 8,000 square feet and about 6,000 feet for services. But when we're dealing with a single owner and the way they've split up the building, we're really just looking for a percentage of occupation. Now, what we've worked out is that 71% is residential. And that what that's comprised of is the 3 floors I mentioned, plus a share of the 4th floor as administrative office. That number works out to $2,148,460. 2,148,460. The school portion is 29%, which works out to 877,540 or 877,540. They add up to 3,026,000. And again, we're just taking all the common areas and splitting them up and assigning them, because a common area by itself has really no value. It's the percentage. This is all based on the percentage of the areas in use and the common areas being added to that. So that's what we believe should be the case on the exemption, being 2.1 million residential and 877,000 school tax exempt, institutional school tax exempt. And I don't know if you need to add anything about accessory offices like in hospitals and things like that.
No, I think it's clear that if there's space that's ancillary to the primary use of the supportive office space, in some cases laundry facilities, cooking facilities, all of that forms part of the exempt space. So Mr. Newbold gave the example of a hospital or a school, for example, a traditional school, more than just the classrooms, or you have more than just the hospital rooms, you have support areas as well. They're all within.
Right, a principal doesn't teach, but a principal supervises the teachers, and that's the concept we're applying here.
Those would be our submissions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Van der Remme?
Clarification, there's so much that was said.
Yeah, I apologize.
It's okay.
We didn't break it up.
Okay.
Speak up, please.
Just a point of clarification in my questioning, Mr. Chair. You are seeking basically education portion and residential portion, correct, for the building, for the property. In terms of the education portion, I was just wondering, this is tied into the training programs that were presented, right? that you were saying?
Well, it's a couple of different types of education. One is trades education for working in Norway House, and the second is language training. And we've been through several hearings where language training is a seminary of learning. 300 William was the example that the board and the assessor agreed with us on. And obviously trade schools, we know them to be school exempt as well. So,
And just to clarify further, these training programs, are they somehow accredited, or would they be towards a credit if they go to a different school? For example, maybe a college or another seminary of learning?
well, the language supplies a certificate at the end, which is an accreditation. And again, the other example we had on this was 259 Portage, where recent immigrants were taught computer skills in Canada. And again, we were all in agreement that that was a seminary of learning. So the language one is like that. As for the trade ones, I think that they form like there's a couple of different tradespeople they were using, and you know, some people were being taught to be janitors, some people were being nurses' aides, some people were given acclimatization courses as registered nurses in here. So it all led to their education to work in Norway House, and it was a smaller function. Most of their training is geared on lifestyle issues. They also do, in addition to the language, and it's all coming back to me now, and I apologize, we're dealing with addictions issues in these classes. And as you can see, the program itself is called Treatment Access Program. So they were giving a lifestyle lessons in substance abuse and issues like that.
And another clarification on your brief, Municipal Assessment Act Section 22(1) was quoted or was included.
That we're not relying on
No.
22, it's 23(1)D.
23(1).
Yes.
Okay. Because it just, I was just going through it last week, and then today I saw it. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, just an appraiser put this in, not a lawyer.
Okay. And then, so you're going with the 23(1)D.
It's for the basement space.
For the basement space.
That's correct, and ancillary space. The balance of the residential is taxable, but it's just under a different class.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Davidson?
I have a couple questions. And obviously I'm not a lawyer. The part that you're asking, I believe, you're relying on the classification of property,
Yes,
saying that it's Res 2 versus other as it's currently classified.
correct.
Okay, so I had a question when I look at the reg for Res 2, it says dwelling units for residential occupation. And so there's sort of two things when I look at the definition section. Dwelling units, and I heard you say this, requires, these notes are not great, a self-contained unit, facilities for living, sleeping, prep, and consumption of
Yes.
food. But does every unit have like actual food prep?
As far as I know, they do. They each have a stove and there's a small.
But you
refrigerator.
indicate, sorry. Yeah, and you indicated though most people go down to the dining room rather than prep the food in there.
That's a personal choice, but so most people there, as I understand, I don't know percentage wise, but each of the units themselves are certainly, if not used, designed for that use.
Right.
So they could certainly be, so if you look at the definition of Res 2, it's not only actual usage, but designed to be used.
Yeah.
So the option is there, it's just a matter of personal preference. I think many of the people there just rely on the dining facility.
Sure. Probably because it's easier.
Yes.
It's like ordering skip the dishes all the time
Yeah,
instead of coming in.
making your own KD in the room.
That's right.
The other thing though, it says for residential occupation, and when I look at the definition of residential occupation, it says means the use of a building or land, blah, blah, that is designed or intended to be used by a person, blah, blah, as a home. So when you see home, that would often suggest more long-term primary residence, that's what's on your driver's license. So I don't know anything about what courts have defined that as, but just in sort of a common thinking, a stay to go to receive medical support, even if it's like short-term or long, sort of like the Canadians across from BHSC now.
Right.
Like, does that really fit the definition of home, or how do you see it as fitting the
Right,
definition
so
of
it's
home?
obviously a temporary home. I think the best
Right.
analogy that you could use is a dormitory at the university, and that actually is one of the specific under 4 sub C, dormitories is included there. So if you ask a student, where's your home? I expect most university students would not cite, university college or somewhere at the university. It's a temporary place, and I would argue that this facility arguably does fall within the definition of dormitory as well. Again, if you look at the dictionary definition of what a dormitory is, it's not strictly speaking a university or a college residence, if you will. It's a place where one can sleep and make as a temporary home and so forth.
But do you think as a lawyer that a dormitory, like the primary purpose of a student being in a dorm, like say at the U of M, is education, the primary purpose, and that's what they're doing. They don't have a secondary life back at wherever they came from, whereas a person coming for medical assistance to this facility, their intent is to go back because that's where their primary family, their life, their work, their whatever lies.
And you're quite right in the sense that I think if you ask them where their traditional home is and where their permanent home is, it probably is back in the community. But I think you must remember that what we're looking at is really we're assessing and classifying the physical structure, and not how the person who is presently occupying views it, but how it is being used or designed to be used. So if this facility were put up on the market, for example, as Mr. Neufeld alluded to, is their intention was initially was on the first floor was to actually make it an apartment building style out of it. So how are they designed, and what is the design of that? And it quite clearly is a self-contained dwelling unit. It's different than, as you mentioned, the Canadians across the hospital. That's certainly a traditional hotel. It doesn't have likely many of the rooms, certainly the Canadians won't have food preparation stations. Some might, but it's a hotel, and hotels are clearly excluded under there's a certain definition that they're out, as our personal care homes and other facilities are excluded. So I appreciate this is a bit of a unique property per se, but I think if you look at the definition, it does certainly speak to what is the design of this and how are they used. And I think many of the
The classification is based on use primarily.
correct, or intended use. So the and if you look, my understanding when I went through the facility is that many of the individuals who were living there, it was not a overnight accommodation or a short-term stay. Many of them were there for a considerable period of time. So would it be their permanent home? I would agree it's probably not their permanent home and not likely where they consider to be their permanent home, but it certainly is a temporary home for them. So,
Well,
And I had one other question.
the first floor, and I don't want to interrupt you, but the first floor is and was planned and is an actual apartment style. The other floors had the dormitory style, but first is a full-fledged apartment.
Yeah, I was more focused on the use. So my other question is, we often see comparables brought when we're looking at, comparisons for rent or, similar properties, et cetera. So what other similar facilities are classified and receiving a partial exemption the way you're seeking for this property? Like, what would be a similar facility?
similar facility would be, I can't speak to So one example I could give you would be where it's a split class that you're asking for, you're asking
Like a
about?
similar one that that you see is doing the same uses as this one that receives the partial exemption due to the education or
education.
receives the res two for this kind of,
So I can't think of
residential
a
occupation.
specific example because this is a very, what I would describe as a very unique use property, but there certainly are various other split class.
not so much split class, one that's, are there other, these kind of, places where you are receiving medical treatment and you're coming in from the north or from other locations that are similarly, classified this way and therefore receiving a res two versus another, which obviously changes.
Mr. Neufeld may be familiar with one, he can speak to it.
We were looking up several. Ronald McDonald House, which is set for families of children in treatment, is fully exempt. And it's actually called a medical treatment facility. So I don't understand if that's a mistake or or a way of living. No, it's medical treatment facility, surprisingly.
But there's no classification code.
No, sorry, it's labeled medical
Oh,
treatment
I see.
facility,
Okay,
institutional exempt. Sorry.
okay.
Other ones we looked at, and this is more towards the transient end, where Salvation Army, their hostel, is called institutional school exempt.
What about other First Nations? Don't some of them also have similar facilities where they bring their members down for the treatment?
Well, I'd worked on a few doing appraisals on them, because it's a fairly common issue where they wait for the most of the facilities are designed on the wait for a bed to open up at a hospital, and then there's a short-term stay facility. Most all of them were just residential.
What about the Quest Inn? Because you cited that.
The Quest.
The Quest Inn in
Quest
your
Inn
brief,
is a hotel.
but it's used for the same purpose. The use is the same.
It's effectively overflow, so they actually can't accommodate these
Yeah,
people.
that's what
They have to,
your brief
they have
said
to put them
that,
somewhere.
Yeah.
The one example I could give you,
Okay.
although it's slightly different, but similar context, and this was actually a case that I had a number of years ago. It was a payment in lieu of taxes, so it wasn't a assessment act. They applied, the Municipal Assessment Act applies. So we had and it actually was at Stony Mountain Penitentiary. Out, if you're familiar with that facility, there's a number of residential homes on the site.
Oh, yes.
And the question became, how do you class those residences out there, because they're part of the
And
institution?
which way did it go in the end?
They went residential.
They did, eh?
They did, yes. Actually, Mark Newman was the chairman of that panel, and they, my understanding, that was the issue, is that they were designed as a residence. So
Those are long-term stays.
those were obviously a little bit different than what we're talking about here, but I think the best analogy, frankly, you could have is a traditional dormitory at a university, and so clearly those are much more common, and that's why I would suggest that the legislation actually deals with them specifically. This is not something I think you would see commonplace across the across the city or the province for that matter. So that's why obviously it raises some questions, understandably.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Vanderama, you had a question that, oh, it was answered, okay. Mr. Verloop?
Yes, I have a few questions, please. This facility was purchased before 2014.
2003, I think.
And they, excuse me. And they decided to do this renovation starting in 2014.
I think they had, there's some long-range plans in here that I think they had a different usage in mind for it originally, and the reports.
Been working on it since.
Yeah, the reports indicate about 2011 is that they started rolling on this, and large parts were finished in 2014. Time of our inspection in 2019, they were still putting finishing touches on a few of the areas.
Kind of finishing touches. What kind of finishing touches?
Well,
I mean, they were minor, they weren't major.
no,
These things were, this was now running.
mechanical was installed, for example, on the first floor, and what there were some, I think the ceiling, a few of the units needed ceilings installed. They showed us 3 apartments that hadn't been finished, and it was the interior finish, the ceiling, the rug, etc., and the rest were being lived in.
So you could say 90% or so was.
Right. And now we also know that the 4th will be receiving some renovations.
So in the past, aside from this, was this facility paying property taxes?
I think since the government divested of it in 2003, I think it's been Class 60.
Sorry?
I think it's been Class 60 since 2003.
I think this is the first time they've actually had a review of the assessment. Actually had a look at it.
And when I see here is when you presented that individuals, they pay for the room and board?
No, most all of it is funded by the First Nations. Now the thinking is that these first floor apartments, they're hoping to be charging for them. And I do have an answer to an earlier question. I just found the NCN medical receiving facility on Elgin, which was taxable school exempt. That's how they treated it.
Okay, sorry, what is that?
Taxable school exempt.
And my last question is, what is basically the average time that people would stay? I mean, you're not talking somebody staying in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months.
Well, first floor is,
Because mostly this is for medical, I understand.
well, no, first floor is indefinite. It's where you live. Second and third will vary depending on treatment. Like sometimes they're also letting families come in, like Ronald McDonald House too. So you could have a person come down, they wait for a bed, they get admitted, and the family stays. And I don't know what sort of numbers those are, honestly. It's not for a week or a few days. I would suspect it's measured in months.
It says here that a family member is over and above, that escorts are needed, and they have to pay us.
Yeah, they may have a reimbursement program. My understanding is that the band is still covering those costs.
Thank you. Mr. Newfield, these classification liability, when did it come to light?
It came to light June 29th, 2019. And that's when they had what they deemed to be substantial completion of their project. And they reached out to, through our contact in WRHA, who forwarded their names to myself and Mr. Mercury. So we made contact just after the last appeal cycle closed off. And then what we did is we contacted the assessment department and said, can we start discussing this? And we had a series of delays. We were supposed to go firstly in there in September, and we finally got in there on, I just wrote it down here. My scribble sheet here. November 29th, 2019 with Mr. Dupuis, and we did an inspection, and we haven't had any communication since that time.
So the breakdown is 71% residential
Correct?
and 29 for school?
Correct. Yeah. School exempt, yes, institutional school exempt. And as I mentioned, the other properties we saw just went entirely school exempt, institutional school exempt. And I imagine they were leaning heavier on the health provision of it. This one appears to be geared more towards a residential use.
All right. Do you wish to, any summary at all?
Just a clarification of one other point I made earlier, I had mentioned the Stony Mountain facility. That was a little bit different. It actually was institutional because there was no real permanent stay, no long-term stay that was really considered part of the penitentiary, if I will. So it's a little bit different than what we're talking about here. This is as Mr. Neufeld indicated, many of the residents are there. They're living facilities and are designed for that purpose. But I think you have, unless there's any other questions, those are our comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
The individuals are staying there while they're also being treated for medical?
If the,
Because I understand it's just that they're pertaining to coming down for medical, not for being residential, just to stay there and have an accommodation.
it would depend on their treatment, because if it's an outpatient procedure,
But it is for medical treatment.
they operate 3 vans for transportation, so for outpatient work. And then the other part of it would be to wait for a bed to open up for long-term care.
So as soon as the medical treatment is finished and so forth, then they're required to leave and go back.
It depends if they're fit to travel or if there's other reasons why they,
Well, unless there's a hiccup. that
Yeah.
they can't make it.
and I believe there's some flexibility in it, but, and because it's operated by the First Nations, the flexibility and why they're going to stay if there were another reason, such as job training or something like that, then the accommodation is there for them. Certainly not a holiday, not in Winnipeg.
Yes, Mr. Van der Rema.
Yeah, we've heard of arguments put forward, and it seems that there was a question that was raised earlier by one of the panel members pertaining to the use of this property as a dormitory, which is one of the R2 or residential 2 component, or as based on the Municipal Assessment Act. There was a question pertaining to driver's license. Would you be able to obtain? I believe that dormitories, when it is being used as a dormitory, you can, however, in this case, it's not it's not a longer term stay in terms of you can make it as where you can put your address in. Unlike dormitories in university, the students can use that as their address in their IDs, in their identification, or where they are located. In terms of this use, I think, or I believe that it is more of a transient while you are getting treatment in the city. Is it treated as a home based on the definition of a residential occupation? I don't believe it is being used as a home. It is basically, again, as I would reiterate, a transient while you're receiving treatment or care within the city. A cheaper option may be for a hotel, against a hotel, or an Airbnb, for example. And I think that's all that I would say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to?
Just a quick response to that, because it's the first time I've actually heard the assessor's position, and I think that's a bit of an artificial distinction to say that where you can put your residential address on a driver's license. Many of these people are there for some time receiving medical treatment, and if you ask where Mr. X is living, I think the natural answer would be he's presently living in Winnipeg because he's receiving X medical treatment, dialysis, cancer, radiation treatment, and he's living at 333 Maryland. Where he puts his address on a driver's license, I would suggest, is a highly artificial designation for the purposes of this class. The they may be temporarily living there as a student would be who's taking a short-term course at a university. The purpose for which they are in Winnipeg really shouldn't make a difference, whether it's for education, for training, for medical purposes, or some other purpose. This is where they are temporarily living, and it is being used as a home, and it's designed as a home, not a hotel. So having heard the assessor's position for the first time, I wanted to have an opportunity to respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes your parts, gentlemen. So thank you for appearance and the results very soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we'll take 5-10 minutes. So we'll call a hearing back to order. And Mr. Navarro will, you heard probably the preamble, etc., and we'll have you sworn in.
Please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
You affirm the evidence you are presenting to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
So, Mr. Navarro, you have 3 properties, so we'll go to the first one that's on the docket, which is 530 Ross Avenue. So, Mr. Vanderama will have you read through that, and then we'll ask Mr. Navarro to state his wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next property has a file number of 20-486. It has a roll number of 13099069135 with an address of 530 Ross Avenue. We're dealing with the roll year of 2021 with a reference date of April 1st, 2018. It has an assessed value of $1,285,000. It is classified as 20 residential 2 with a liability of taxable. I would like to request for non-co-op based on evidence that's attached on page. Let me just get the page, Mr. Chair. Page 9, beginning page 9 up to page 16. For the reason that, yes, there was an email granting an extension to June 29, 2018. However, on the facts date, it was received on 08/17/2018, which is August 17, 2018. On page 13, sorry, beginning of page 13. That's where the fax date is.
Mr. Navarro, comment or
Question,
sorry?
comment or question?
Yes, just comment in regards to the non-co-op.
In terms of the non-cooperation, I would say that the owner did respond, granted a few weeks late. I don't think that there was any malice in terms of their approach. The city was still able to use this information, in my opinion, to develop the assessment and use it in their model. So I feel that it's not fair to be granting a penalty that punishes them over 2-year period, well, over a 1-year period, based on a few weeks of delay. I don't have anything beyond that.
Ori, do you have any questions in regards to the non-co-op?
Just quickly, so we don't know why the owner wasn't able to respond at the extension date.
I think it's just his lack of familiarity with this process in general. This is a new property to him. This is newly built. He was renting up this property at the time. He works in real estate as a real estate agent. So that is his side of the business, but in terms of the taxation part of it, I think he was just, I don't know. I honestly can't give you an answer.
Thank you.
Robert, any questions in regards to the non-co-op?
It was asked.
Okay. Just to add another little wrinkle, you are seeking confirmation?
Confirmation.
Well, that's according to my notes here.
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So I think what we'll probably do is shut down the camera and both you can leave and we will discuss the non-co-op issue. And give you a ruling in that respect. Okay, we'll call the hearing back to order. In regards to the non-co-op issue, it has been denied. So, Mr. Vanderema, you may do your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may continue the property description section of page 1. It is a commercial row house with one building, 2 stories, an actual and effective years built of 2017. It has 7 suites with 6 outdoor parking stalls. The zoning for this property is residential multifamily, land area of 7,674 square feet, a planned area of 3,524 square feet, and with a basement area of 3,524 square feet, giving it a total gross floor area of 10,728 square feet. On page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. Page 4 is where the income valuation summary is. It has again 7 total units with 3 2-bedroom units and 4 3-bedroom units. It has a class and liability of 20T, as mentioned earlier. It has a gross potential rent of $105,907, vacancy rate of 3%, which translates to a vacancy in terms of dollars of about $3,177, which gives it an effective gross income of $102,730. Expense ratio is at 43.7%, giving it an expenses of about $44,893. With that, the net operating income is $57,837. With a capitalization rate of 4.5%, the capitalized income is $1,285,267, giving it a market value per suite of about $183,571.43. On page 5 are 4 rent comparables. They are all commercial row housing, and most of them are have an effective year built of 1976 to 1985. One has 2014. They all have a number of units ranging from 8 to 11. And their average monthly rent per unit ranges from $1,094 to $1,301 per month. On page 4 are some capitalization rates. This is the range that we have in our department. If I may just read through it. A direct capitalization method is used to convert a property's single year of income into an indication of value by dividing the estimated net operating income by an appropriate capitalization rate. Capitalization rates can be derived from properties that have sold by dividing each property's net operating income by its sale price. For 2020 general reassessment as of April 1st, 2018, reference date, capitalization rates were derived from model-generated estimates of net operating income and sale prices that were time-adjusted to April 1st, 2018. ratio statistics for the Assessment and Taxation Department's income producing models satisfy the standards specified and set forth in the Standard of Ratio Studies, published by the International Association of Assessing Officers, or IAAO. These capitalization rates were further supported by a review of industry standard market reports and external property appraisals. Capitalization rate reports for the first quarter of 2018 from Colliers International Canada, CBRE National Research, and Cushman and Wakefield were reviewed. The City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department does have a wide range of capitalization rates, as all parcels in the city have been accounted or have to be accounted for. Variables such as size, age, and location will influence the capitalization rate applied in the calculation of values. The following chart compares the published rates to the City of Winnipeg capitalization rates for the property types that are reported. The 20th and 80th percentiles are also shown for the City of Winnipeg data, indicating a narrowed range of capitalization rates used for 60% of the parcels within the specific property type. In many cases, the published rates fall within 20th to 80th percentiles, indicating the tenability of the City of Winnipeg's derived capitalization rates. The chart below shows a lot of different property types. There's the multifamily in the fourth section of it. We have a range below of about 4% up to a high of 7.3%. And then the 20th percentile to 80th percentile range is between 4.9 to 5.3%. On page 7 are some capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. So in the third section is where the multifamily sales are. There are 5 sales. The first one is located at 191 Roach Street with a sale of February 8, 2018. It was sold for $3,610,000. It has 36 suites and an effective year built of 1971, which translates to $100,278 per suite and a cap rate of 4.84%. The second one is located at 394 Talbot Avenue. Has a sale date of December 2017. The sale price is about $770,000 with 11 suites, an effective year built of 1965, giving it a $70,000 per suite rate and a cap rate of 4.03%. The third one is located at 285 Maxwell Place. It was sold in June 2017. Has a sale price of $2,225,000 with 23 suites. Its effective year built is 1960 with a rate of $96,739 per suite and a cap rate of 4.4%. The fourth one is located at Langside, 277 Langside Street. It is sold in January 2018 with a sale price of $3 million and the number of suites of about 47. It has an effective year built of 1974 and a rate per suite of $70,000. It has a cap rate of 6.09%. The last one is located at 333 Ward Avenue. Has a sale date of January 2016 for $18 million. It has 103 number of suites. It has an effective year built of 2006 and a rate per suite of $174,757 and a cap rate of 5%. And fourth, I have attached the 2017 income and expense mailer for the subject property. There is also the permit on page 17, which is translating to about $994,000. just for the building itself. And some of the advertisement from the internet, I think this is way back. It was from May 2017, listed on page 19. And I think that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
I thank you, sir. Questions of the assessor, Mr. Navarro?
Yes. Mr. Valderrama, did you review the income and expense questionnaire?
Yes.
Okay. And you disregarded the income and expense questionnaire for the most part, correct?
Well, I looked at it and compared it to our model and market, and the asking for the property of about 1,300. It was asking for 1,325 to be exact on page 19.
Okay. And basically the rent that you've gone with is a modeled rent?
Yes, it is. That's on page 4, yes. It is a model rent of $1,260 per unit, average monthly rent.
And from your comparable list on your capitalization rates on page 6, would you say that none of these are really being taken from row houses in terms of the cap rate analysis?
On page 6,
Yes.
it's a mix of everything, all of it.
Okay, but it's specifically citing
Low rise.
high rise, low rise, low rise A, low rise B.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So these are most likely proper apartment buildings?
If we're looking at the low and the high, not the 20th and 80th percentile, it's looking at everything, all of the multifamily, categorized among the 4.
Okay, so the city has basically included row housing in low rise A and low rise B, correct?
That's what I'm not sure about that, where it's located in the low rise or low rise A or low rise B, because there are 3 low rises.
So then there is no specific capitalization rate for row housing?
It's included in those ranges.
Okay. Now, you've said that age, size, location affect the cap rate, correct?
Yes, by the modeling, yes.
Okay. Now, the capitalization rate that you currently have on this property is 4.5?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So in terms of those 3 criteria, which one is age the more important one?
Not more important one, but I would say age has a factor affecting it, which is 2017, if I'm not mistaken. That's the age. Okay. Or
Now,
actual year built, sorry.
would location have an effect on this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So your range is from 4 to 7.30 on the low side and the high side. So 4.0 would be essentially the lowest cap rate for multi-residential housing, correct?
Which page?
Sorry, that's page 6.
Page 6, yes.
Okay. Now 4.5 is what you have on there. So is 0.5 the location?
It's a mix of the location, the size, everything in it.
Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, questions of the assessor?
Just a simple question. Is everything here in your evidence all model driven?
In terms of the
Like the choice of
the page 4,
comps, both for.
the choice of comps,
General comparabilities?
the page 5, I specifically look for a row house.
Okay.
I tried to look for the same total number of units of 7. However, I found 8 and 11. And then I tried to go with the mix of 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms. But there wouldn't be any perfect comparables. However, I tried to be as close to my subject as possible.
Okay, because when I look at the comparables like Wolseley, which many think is a desirable neighborhood, it's much older. It looks like it has more units. The apartment sizes are smaller and the rent is around the same. Is that how you would interpret it? Like, I guess it's
Because it's an area that's
true as well.
desirable. However, we can also, in terms of proximity to the subject, Isabel Street is close as well. And 2014, which commands $1,200 of average monthly rent, $1,232 to be exact. The Wolseley area, which is about 1,094. Again, it is a 3-bedroom unit only apartment block.
But these were selected
Yes,
not by the model, but by you.
by
then.
myself. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
correct.
That's great, thanks. That was everything, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luke?
What you're saying is that the potential rent and the expenses and so forth are model driven, and you didn't use any of the information that the individual sent, even though it was late.
I reviewed it and I compared it to the model and what the market is commanding, since we're pretty close in terms of the parameters we used, specifically on the average monthly rent based on my rent comparables. I just went with our model on this one. Thank you.
Robert? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Adamrama,
Yes, sir.
you looked at the permit that was taken out for the subject?
Yes, I attached it in here.
Okay. And I think you had said the permit was valued at $994,000?
Yes, it's the estimate. Okay, that's correct.
So any overrides in the evaluation here?
Valuation in terms of the income valuation?
Yeah, like any overrides, so, this is a fairly new building per se, eh?
Correct.
So, okay, so you feel as if the 4.5% cap rate is applicable?
Yes.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Navarro, the floor is yours, sir.
If you look at my presentation, again, on page 1, you can see a picture of the property and an overhead map of it. I will just
Oh, yours is frozen? Okay. I just noticed, I guess, on mine, it's sort of inverted, so I'm trying to sort of write it.
I'm
No.
on, okay.
You're okay? And Lori's is frozen? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh, no, keep going. Actual size. Rotate. There's one.
Unless you guys
Oh,
all want to
okay.
close it, and then I
Okay.
can try to fix it.
Okay. I want to go to that one. Oh, this is,
That one's fine. Okay.
this is fine. Okay. Sorry,
Sorry.
Lori. Lori's is frozen.
Oh,
It's all
okay.
grayed out. Is that too much open?
It's asking you if you want to
Oh, I
close
can read
everything
that.
or not.
Oh, I guess I probably should. But if not, just close it. what is this?
We're on number three,
Yeah, okay, I'm just getting the applicants. Yes. I should have read it a little closer, sorry about that.
Sorry, you okay? Henry? Mr. Navarro, floor
Okay,
is yours.
yeah. We'll go to page 7. So the approach that I took was the income approach. In terms of data, we didn't have a lot of data on this property. And having reviewed the assessor's brief from the time that the briefs were submitted to now, I actually agree with the assessor's net operating income. I believe in terms of the rent, their income is actually probably more reliable than the CMHC rents that I have chosen. So I am asking that the net operating income be accepted from the assessor.
Okay, so does that change your figure then?
Yes, that will
Okay.
change my figure. The capitalization rate obviously is where the argument lies.
Yes, you're at 6.
Yes, I'm at 6.
So you have a value then?
Yes, it's 963,950 or 964,000 rounded. Now, there's a huge disparity there between the assessor's rent capitalization rate and mine. And obviously, what this comes down to is where this building is located and what type of construction. So these are individualized housing units. So these are like homes. They're not like apartment units. These are essentially homes right beside each other. Now, they're stick built, they're low rise. One of the things that caught my attention, because we didn't have the income and expense mailer, I got to view that once the assessor submitted and I submitted. One of the things that caught my attention right off the bat was the insurance on this property at $24,000. That is an extremely high amount of money for an insurance payment on a property of this size. And that is partly due to the type of construction. I believe it probably has more to do with the location of the property. And that's where I'm recognizing that there is a difference in terms of the capitalization rates between what the assessor is posing and what I am suggesting. Now, 4.5, I'm sure all of you have been here through apartment appeals. And 4.5 is a very, very favorable cap rate, very low. And I see it in the better investment grade properties. I don't see it in this type of property. This is, again, something that is owned by an individual. It's not owned by a corporation. There's expected to be high expenses in this property. I don't know what the expenses are. And certainly we don't get a good idea of it from this I&E. Probably down the road, we will have a better idea. And that is because this property is still relatively new. But what I can, again, point to is look at the insurance on this property. It is outrageous. And that, again, is, I think, pointing to the issue at hand, which is this is not a favorable location. This is why properties in this area receive an extra amount on the capitalization rate, typically. Granted, the property is new, but we're still talking about a new property within this neighborhood, this area. And I'm not knocking the neighborhood, but it is often reflected in the sale prices of these properties in these distressed neighborhoods. You can see the one example in the assessor's own brief on Langside, 277 Langside. Mind you, it's an older apartment building, but it's got 47 suites. The capitalization rate is over 6. So this is what I'm trying to point at, is that 4.5 is an extremely low cap rate for, I think, this type of property in this location. And I would suggest that a capitalization rate of 6 is probably more appropriate. Again, the value based on the net operating income supported by the assessor, and the capitalization rate of 6 is 964 rounded. And I'm open for questions.
I thank you. Mr. Vanderama, questions?
Yeah, just with regard to that cap rate of 6%. So basically, from 4.5 goes up to 6% because of neighborhood, because of, well, not neighborhood, I would just generically say location.
I think just on location alone, typically there is that bump up on the cap rate. But also looking at the type of construction, and you can see it reflected again in the expenses that are there. Now, some of the expenses, I disregarded also, and I'm sure you did too. For example, the professional expenses. However, the insurance is not something that I think that is unfortunately a reflection of where this property is.
In that case, you're valuing the property, the entire property, including land, to almost right below its construction cost, which I have attached also in my brief, which is about 990,000.
Yeah, I mean,
Relatively brand new.
relatively brand new. However, again, these tend to be long-term investments. So whereas your typical institution, investment grade property, an investor may be looking at a 10-year horizon on their investment. This is a long-term investment for this person. So that's how they look at it. This is their retirement. So they're looking at a much larger horizon in terms of that investment than a REIT would, or a large, apartment owner.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Faluk?
You obviously are using the insurance amount that was recorded by the owner. Did you confirm that with him?
Yes, I did. I did speak with him. I certainly had some disagreement with some of the expenses, and I told him that
That he's put together.
there's certain, for example, professional fees were extremely high, out of order.
Do you think that some of this insurance was maybe a consolidation of a few properties, since you say he's in real estate, and it was all put into this one?
I'm not so sure about that.
I'm not trying to say you
Yeah.
did. Also, when you have insurance, it is also based on the value that you put on the property. So did you ask what he insured?
I didn't ask the insurance value of the property, no.
And so when you're using the potential rent, the same as the city, the vacancy rate you're using is 2 instead of 3?
Exactly. So I'm agreeing with him on everything in terms of the net operating income.
So you're going down all the way to the expense rate and so forth. It's just that when it gets down to, the difference will be the 6 instead of 4.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have no questions. Do you wish summary, either party? Okay. Okay, we'll go on to the next one, which is 211 Edmonton Street. And Mr. Navarro, you were appealing liability classification and quantum.
So I reviewed the quantum, and the property is valued on cost. This is a church with an attached area in the back that houses people. It is a unique situation. So the city has not valued this as a proper apartment building or a house. It's been valued on the cost approach. Now, in terms of looking at the cost approach, I did not disagree with the cost approach that the city had applied on it. So
there's no problem in regards to
the quantum,
quantum?
yeah,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about liability?
Liability, there is, yeah.
Okay,
And
you want
class-
to talk about
Yes,
that,
yes,
please?
yes. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is a church, and in the back there is an area which houses people. And I'm going to be specific, it houses women. These women are coming from war-torn, impoverished nations. They're coming here to build new lives. And it's being done through the church organization, which is a nonprofit organization. And you can see on the third page, if you open up, there's some information on this organization. Again, this is Holy Names House of Peace. They are a charitable organization. And what they do is they take in women from these impoverished, war-torn countries and give them an opportunity to build a new life here in Canada. It is strictly them. They are coming here. It's, again, the stays here can range between up to 2 years. 18 newcomer women. They're teaching them, they're giving them skills. They're essentially giving them that second chance that they didn't have in those countries where they were living. If you can see off to the left at the bottom, there is a quotation there, "At the House of Peace, I am surrounded by wonderful women, but from all over the world. They have suffered so much, yet still love life and care for each other." This is the type of service that they're providing. And obviously the section of the act that we looked at in terms of looking at the classification liability of this property was section 23(1)(e), where it is owned or held in trust for and is used by a charitable organization primarily for the purpose of giving relief or assistance to the aged, indigent, or sick persons to a maximum exemption of 0.81. Obviously, it doesn't fall under aged and it doesn't fall under sick persons. The one word that we're honing in on is indigent, which has many different definitions: impoverished, down and out. And I believe that fits the definition of what these women are. And in my opinion, they meet all of the criteria of that section of the legislation. Again, this is a nonprofit. These people are receiving help, assistance to better their lives, and it is on a temporary basis. Housing itself is communal living. So it is individual bedrooms with communal shared facilities. So we're talking shared bathrooms, shared kitchen facilities. It's not meant to be a home. It is only meant to house them on a temporary basis until they get them on their feet with the proper skills to actually function in a new country. So that is essentially the gist of my argument. In terms of the classification liability, we're looking at institutional school tax exempt.
So, Mr. Navarro, there's a split on the property right now.
Sorry?
There's a split on the property right now.
There is a split, but the split is actually for the church and for the housing side of it.
Yeah.
So the housing would include the area that is housing these women that are transitioning through this process.
So what are you proposing then?
So the split should be
Obviously, some
1
of the
million.
taxable side.
yeah, so it's 1,014 exempt institutional. That's obviously following the church. And then the residential should be changed to institutional school tax exempt. So as I reminded you there, after reviewing the cost approach on this, I do not have an issue with the quantum on it. So there is a proper split on here. It's just that the classification and liability on the residential portion, I believe, is incorrect based on the legislation that we're looking at.
So, give us the figures then. Or you want this whole, you want
No.
the taxable portion to be included as institutional.
Yes, so the
So 100%.
no, it would be the classification would be 100% institutional, but there would be a split on the liability. Yes. Yeah. So there would be a $1,014,000 portion that is exempt, and then a $976,000 portion that is school tax exempt.
Mr. Van der Emmen?
Comment or question on this one. To Mr. Navarro, I'm looking at the split, and you agree that in the cost approach that we did, the split is fine in terms of the area, the land, the building. Is that correct? Correct. Correct. So we have it exempted as 40 institutional exempt based on the church, correct? On that note, would you consider this as a church with a residential component? Because obviously the church is assessed higher and bigger than the residential component.
So the residential component is not your atypical residential component. So if you're saying that it is a residential apartment, there I would have a disagreement with you. So obviously the question is what is this being used for? And whether the classification fits that institutional classification. Based on the Act, I believe it falls directly under that section of the Act 23(1) E.
I'm thinking since the church is assessed bigger, so this is considered a church with a residential component, now which falls under Municipal Assessment Act 22(1)(I). And it's not the other way around where it is a group.
I mean, if you're willing to change it all to exempt, that's great for us.
It's
But
not that it's all exempt. It's more of the church is fully exempt. However, whenever we assess a church with a residential component, the residential component is not exempt. It's always taxable.
right,
Which is the small
Right,
component
but-
of property being used as a church.
the question would be who is using this institutional or this residential component that you speak of, and what is it being used for? So would you say that it's being used by a nonprofit group?
But it is being used as a nonprofit or by a nonprofit or a church. However,
Well, no, the church is separate from the nonprofit. Okay?
we look at the property, what is it predominantly being used as? It is being used predominantly or majority, I mean, more than 50% in my calculation as a church.
Yeah.
And it qualifies under Municipal Assessment Act 22(1)(I) already, which grants a full exemption. I think that's just my my stand on this one, Mr. Chair.
Are you
Yes,
saying
the-
that the church, the whole thing should be exempt? I'm
No,
not
I'm
understanding
not
what you're
saying
saying.
that. If we assess this church, normally there are some residential components in the church. The residential component is usually or always a taxable component, fully taxable.
So that would provide housing for, say, the clergy or something like
Yes.
that?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes,
So
exactly.
that is not the case though.
Even if it's not the case though, it is still being used predominantly as a church with a residential component.
Right. But therein lies the question of whether it has the correct liability on it and classification.
It's the same argument as what I've been telling. If it's predominantly used as church with a small residential component for whoever's using that small residential component, it's still
So-
fully taxable.
I guess a hypothetical question I could ask you is if that component were a group home for the aged, it would have that institutional school tax exemption on it, would it not?
I have dealt with a few that has more space or more area being used as a group care home, and maybe about 10-20% of the entire area as a church. Now that is considered a group care home with a small church. However, this one, in this case, the church is bigger. And you did not argue, or you mentioned earlier that you agree with the assessment on the cost approach. The
Well,
church has a bigger.
The quantum is not the question. It's
No, it's not. It's the assessment of the
It's-
areas and all
the
that.
classification and
Yes.
liability
Mhm.
to taxation.
Mhm.
So that's where the argument lies.
Right. And I guess that is what I'm trying to put forward, Mr. Chair. On my side, we're arguing that this is predominantly church with a residential property or residential component, which should be assessed as a 20T. And of course, I mean, Mr. Navarro is arguing the other way, group care with a small, well,
I know.
I'm not saying small. I shouldn't say small.
I
I
used
don't
to-
want to put words into his mouth, with a church. So, with that said, I think I just have
Okay.
provided you with my stand on that one, Mr. Chair.
David, send questions?
I have a couple. Start following what you're saying. So are there any cases, it sort of sounds like you're saying that it follows the quantum of the space. So the biggest space as an area is how you primarily do it. So that's why we've got this church and then this bit of res. But do you have any properties where it can be both, so to speak, where you have it might be the biggest quantum, but you can still receive an exemption under whatever these others, like two different liabilities to taxation, like a church and then say it was a great big huge church and that was most of it, but it had a seniors.
I believe I'm
home.
still.
Do
I
you
believe
have
I'm
any
still
of
at-
those other,
Um,
are there properties like that?
I would say, yes, there are.
Okay.
However, here is the scenario that I have dealt with. The group care home is always bigger in terms of building footprint compared to the church or being used as a church. It's a smaller area.
Right.
So it's a group care home with a smaller.
Yeah, I
Church,
see
yeah,
what you're saying. I'm
that's-
just asking,
Mhm.
in the law, like, is this the normal interpretation on all your assessed properties?
You get an assessment based on the use of the property, predominant use of the property. So if you qualify on that one,
So it shouldn't
Yeah,
matter that
there.
it's a piece of a larger quantum. It's primarily the use, right?
yes,
Okay. And I have another question then. In terms of you're relying on 23(1)(e), right?
23(1)(e).
For the exemption?
Oh,
Oh, sorry, I'm
that's,
supposed to be,
Mr. Navarro.
I forget who I'm.
Mr. Navarro's, I
It's
think that's
okay.
Mr.
It's
Navarro's
okay.
Oh, sorry.
argument.
That's okay.
I just have a question because you're relying on it, the charitable, yes, and then these women in this residential facility being indigent. So what about, what is the classification and liability taxation of, say, those newcomer homes run by other, there's a lot of welcome home or the different ones, because like you're
Yeah.
relying on indigent, but I mean,
I
it doesn't
don't
specifically
think-
say you
Uh,
have to be.
I can't answer what the classification liability would be of those things, but what I would say is that the situation in this particular case is, again, I mentioned the fact that this is communal living. There are no children involved. These are only women who are coming here, as opposed to families that are being housed in newcomer homes or
Don't they
things.
have single people in those as well?
I'm not sure what the situation is, but this would be specifically for these women on a temporary basis living in communal situations. Now, you also mentioned a situation where, does this exist where there is a property with predominant classification and then a split like this, yes. In fact, I've handled many situations where there is a commercial property with a split because there is, for example, seminary of learning within that building, commercial office building with a seminary of learning. So that actually fits under the same section of the Act 23.1. So I would say that, yes, this situation does exist.
So then when they're choosing these women, because you're relying on indigent, it's hard to see that word, do they have criteria, or is it mostly an immigrant woman who's single who applies or comes in through the church sponsorship?
So the criteria is slightly different than you would find in some government-run programs or government-assisted programs for newcomers. This is specifically intended for situations where the women are coming from dire circumstances. So war-torn countries, countries where the lives of women are being threatened. So you could have a situation like Syria a few years back, where women were being traded on the open market. That is the type of situation that these women are coming from. So it's slightly different, but obviously there is a vetting process going through this organization to bring these women here. That process I'm not sure of.
Okay, because could not women coming under, say, a refugee claim, or, could they not be in other housing as well? That might not be classified. I'm just trying to see how.
Right.
relying on
So
indigent-
these women are coming with very few skills. Yeah, I mean, refugees can really come from anywhere. I was a refugee. That's how I came here to Canada. My parents were university educated, though.
I'm trying to relate it more
Yeah.
to
So
what's defined as indigent.
exactly. So indigent is referring strictly. Yeah. I don't know the criteria for newcomer housing. However, I think with every type of housing like that, there are numbers there. So there's only so much supply to assist so many people. But again, this organization is working with, I think, cases that are very bad.
I actually have a home free classes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're doing a lot of good work for women that really don't have a chance at life in the countries that they're coming
So
from.
that's kind of what you're defining.
I would say that indigent is well defined in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Vanderema?
Just wanted to clarify, if there are women without children, or with children in there, based on their website, if I may just pass on this one. There is a 42-bedroom apartments for newcomer women and their children. So they are accommodating women with their children. I can submit this as,
Are you talking about the unit that is beside it, 207?
no, it says
'Cause that's
Marie Rose Place.
Yeah, that's 207.
It's 207? Because
Yeah.
it says here, House of Peace. And
For 40
it's,
women?
42 bedroom.
1-4?
40.
Yeah, that's the
2-bedroom apartment.
that's the building beside
Sure.
207 Edmonton.
Okay, I pulled that back, Mr. Chairman, sorry. Thank you for the.
Yeah, this house is, there's only 18 units here.
Okay, good. That's all the clarification.
Mr. Fallouk,
Thank you.
questions?
Very interesting. Just for clarification from my point. It says exemption from school taxes under 23.1, but subject to section 2526.
Where is that?
It's on page. It is on your presentation. So right after the first page, after the title. So this is exemption from school taxes,
Yes.
23(1), subject to sections 25, 26.
No, that is right. I didn't include sections 25 and 26, but we're looking strictly at this section. I would have to look at what sections 25 and 26 are, but I believe that, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I believe that when I'm focusing on this particular section 23(1), it is strictly that clause in that section that I am focused on in terms of the school tax exemption. I will review 25 and 26.
Mr. Chair, if I may jump in, section 25 is subject to subsection 2, another subsection. It's more on the a right, interest, or estate of an occupier that is assessed under subsection 11.2 or 11.3 is subject to taxation under this act. So it's more on the occupier of the property. That's for section 25. And then 25 subsection 2, occupiers of crown land. Again, we are assessing the property based on whoever's occupying on the land. Yeah. And then the 26 is more on the proportionate building and land tax exemption.
So does any of that pertain to this situation here?
No, it's more on whoever is occupying that property or land and how to appropriate or proportionate building tax or land tax exemption.
The next question is, I have to admit, this is the first time that I've come up upon this situation, so it's a learning curve for me. But it says to a maximum exemption of 0.81 hectare. Does that fall under the 0.81 hectare?
Yeah, I believe this one is only 23,000 square feet, or sorry, the land area is 9,119 square feet. So it's well below 0.81 hectares. It's 2 acres.
That's all the questions I have.
Sorry. I think I'm just, sorry.
Summation at all?
Just a quick one. We've heard, arguments back and forth. The argument being put forward by our department or by myself is more on how to look at this property and how it is being occupied or being used. Obviously, it's predominantly being used as a church, and a certain section, a smaller section as a residential property, and that's where our assessment stands. And of course, the other side has it the other way around. So it's up to you now to decide on that one. And I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you. We'll go to the last one on the docket, which is 269 River. So, Mr. Valderrama, whenever you're ready. And this is vacant land. Okay.
The last one in the docket has a file number of 20-536, has a roll number of 120-323-78000. It is located at 269 River Avenue. We're dealing with the roll year of 2021. With the reference date of April 1st, 2018, the assessed value for this is $960,000 with a classification of residential to taxable liability. It is a vacant residential 2 with a zoning of residential multifamily. It has a land area of 24,550 square feet. On page 3 is the subject's aerial photo. On page 4 is the zoning of the property. It is being zoned as RMFL. On page 5 are 4 comparable land sales that I have attached. They are ranging from land areas of 18,742 square feet up to 31,587 square feet. The sale price per square foot ranges from $37.31 up to $76.83 per square foot. And right below it is the map of the comparable land sales. And that's all the presentation I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Starting with 119 University Crescent, and that is on your comparables page on page 5. Now, is this property near the river?
I believe that.
Okay. And it fronts University Crescent. I took a look at the map, and it fronts, you've looked at our property, obviously, and you know that it has a sliver of an entranceway to the back, correct? Okay, so do you think fronting on University Crescent, that comparable has better access to the site?
I would say it has an access, but better access, it has a better frontage. In terms of access, I believe that the subject property may be accessible.
Now, in terms of 173 Notre Dame, that is a corner lot on the corner of Notre Dame Street and St. Joseph, and that is in North St. Boniface. Again, not near the river. Are there any impediments to development on that site?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And very good access also from two sides?
There's access, yes. It's a
Yeah.
corner lot.
Okay. Now, comparable number 3 is on River Avenue directly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this fronts river, I'm assuming in terms of access, no issues. Now you have the sale price is 900,000. The land area is 18,742. And the sale price per square foot at 76.83. Can you tell me what is 900,000 divided by 18,742?
$48.
Okay. So it's not $76, it's
No.
actually $48.
Mhm.
Okay. So your comparables are actually ranging between $37 and, roughly speaking, $37 and $49.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Lori, questions of the,
I don't have any questions.
okay, Mr. Faluk? Mr. Navarro, I think the floor is yours.
Okay. I am on page 2 there. You can see an overhead picture of the property. And then there is a bird's eye view. So you'll see at the bottom of the picture where it says River Avenue, and you'll see 2 small walk-up apartments. Can you place them? Okay, so our property is the property adjacent to that,
It's
and
in blue.
yeah. So again, this is 24,550 square feet. Subject has zoning designation of RMFL, residential multifamily large. Surrounding land uses are primarily residential, and the subject lies within the Osborne Village neighborhood plan. In this plan, there is a policy regarding natural areas along riverbanks. As a result of the policies regarding riverbanks, we estimate that at least 25% of the subject parcel can't be developed. And we've inserted that information. I've included the map there, and you can actually place the property on this map. So you see the nice little curve. That is actually Mayfair Place. And the property is almost adjacent to that. So you can see that the property does actually extend out to this natural area. So in terms of what to do with this property, well, it's not like a normal property. So right off the bat, we're saying that, you know, approximately 25% of this site is not going to be developed simply because it has that natural area there. So we adjusted the size of the property in terms of valuation. I mean, the city can keep 24,450 square feet, but we're suggesting that we value it on a lesser amount. I've used some similar sales that the assessor has used. In terms of the valuation, there is an error because I stated that I would choose $42 per square foot, whereas I actually put $35 per square foot at 18,413 times 42. That is 346. 773,346. And obviously, if we're rounding, that's 773,000. 42, I think, is a fair amount. I've adjusted for the location. What I think is inferior access. I mean, there is access to this site, but again, there is a narrow band that allows access to the back. It doesn't front. Some people would see the riverbank as a plus, but in this case, because of this secondary plan, a good portion of the back side of the property that fronts the river is not, can't be developed. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Vanderema, questions?
Clarification on the picture on page 3. The one adjacent to the left, is the land in terms of similar access as well? The one at the back, the apartment block at the back by the river? Looks like it has the same configuration in terms of the plan. Or
Yeah.
are they all just one
So,
big property?
The difference here is that those buildings were built at a different time. Okay, so the secondary plan, I believe, came into effect around, if I'm not mistaken, around, I think, December 2015, it says, Osborne Village Neighborhood Plan. I actually cited it at the bottom there. So again, these things came into effect after all of those properties were built. And I mean, I believe some of those properties go back to the early 70s. So those wouldn't have been around at the same time.
And page 7, this is the land sales comparables.
Yeah.
Most of which are sold between 2014 and 2015, correct? Sale dates?
Yeah, they range from 2014 to 2015, 2017, I believe there's one.
And they're much smaller. 2 to 5 are much smaller compared to the subject property, correct?
They are smaller, but closer.
Okay, that's all.
So that's the trade-off, is that you're dealing with properties that maybe are a little bit smaller, but they are relatively closer. So, and we know that the price per square foot rises as these things get smaller. So at 63, we're talking about, you know, sites that are significantly smaller maybe. So
Goes bigger to 18,000 square feet, maybe it might fall within the range of 50s. Or even higher than the 42 per square foot, probably.
yeah, so that's where the interpretation lies, right?
Exactly.
So I'm suggesting that there's probably the other sites that we're looking at are probably better sites for developing, less impediments to development. So you're looking at 119 University Street. It's right on University Crescent. It's a good development site. It fronts it. There's no impediments. And that goes for all of these comparables. The subject doesn't have that. I mean, I point at the access. I mean, it's an issue for me. I think it has inferior access, but the big thing would be the fact that, you know, that tree line is protected.
The 42 per square foot that you mentioned here is based on the sales between 2014, 2015, most likely.
There's no average there.
No, there's not.
So,
The
yeah,
42 per
so
square foot is
I'm
based on.
I mean, I'm essentially doing adjustments in my head. And obviously I'm looking at some of these. I'm looking at the larger ones and seeing what they sell for. And also taking into account the location and the impediments.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson?
Has there been any development on this property before, or just taken down, or it's always vacant?
I don't know how far back the aerials go, but I didn't see anything on there.
Thank you. Mr. Faluk?
I need a little more information from the assessor before I ask my question.
Okay.
So, sir, if you would go to your page 2. So I'm clear here. On the 11th, 25th, 2014, it seems like people have been buying interest into this property. Is this what it represents?
Under the notes section, I indicate that 2014 sales are all interest sales and not fee simple. No registered purchaser. When I did my research.
You know what this means? I'm just trying to figure this. It is all of a sudden like it became
They're buying into the future of it.
buying into the future. So some people bought interest into this thing, and it brought the value up of what was raised.
It's not a value of the fee simple interest of the property. It's
That's just the money that's been put in.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. Okay. So now when I go back to you. Take a look at your. I guess I'll go just to where it says property description and then the picture above it. One more.
page 3.
Property description.
Yeah.
And then you've got the property in yellow on the screen here.
Okay, yeah, I don't have, I have a black and white without that shading in it.
All right. Now, it seems that the only way you can access this property is from River Avenue between these two buildings.
That's why I say it has poor access.
So, right. Maybe I didn't pick that up, but it would seem to me that that would make it a little more difficult to develop this property.
Yes.
And it's been sitting there since 2014.
That's my point. So I'm
not agreeing or disagreeing.
No,
and this issue when I look at it.
And so when I looked at the first thing that I started to see on this property was, and I actually went to this site and walked it just to see how are they going to get equipment?
How wide is that entrance?
Exactly. How are they going to get equipment back there? Because it's not a large area. So I don't know if I don't think they have any ownership of the adjacent parcels. So at this point, I don't see until somebody maybe purchases or until they purchase maybe those 2 apartment buildings, I don't know how they get access into that area. Of course, it's possible. I've seen large equipment go into.
2 cars pass each other?
Yeah, difficult. No, I think it's one vehicle only. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I thank you. Summation, either party? All right, I think that concludes our hearing. So Thank you very much. And results, Mr. Navarro, very shortly.
Thank you.
And Mr. Vanderama, thank you.